The observation deck of the Stellaris Academy hummed with the nervous energy of young minds attempting to grasp concepts their species had only recently discovered. 16 cubs from the Vrakesh collective sat in neat rows, their fur bristling with a mixture of excitement and dread. Today was evaluation day, and their instructor was unlike any they had encountered before. Human Lyra walked between the rows with measured steps, her boots clicking softly against the polished metal floor. She carried a datapad in one hand, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp, observing, calculating, missing nothing. The cubs had learned in their 3 months under her tutelage that those eyes could detect a miscalculation faster than their most advanced scanning equipment. Cub Rallic sat in the 3rd row, his claws gripping his own datapad so tightly that small stress fractures appeared on its edges. His homework assignment lay displayed before him. A theoretical solution to stabilizing a quantum fluctuation drive during atmospheric re-entry. He'd worked on it for 17 hours straight, checking and rechecking his mathematics until his eyes burned. "Homework submissions," Lyra announced, her voice carrying that peculiar human quality soft enough to seem non-threatening, yet commanding enough that every cub immediately straightened. "Upload to the central server. You have 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Not the generous 5-minute window their previous Vrakesh instructors had allowed. Not the understanding extension if technical difficulties arose. 30 seconds. Because as Lyra had explained in their first lesson, in space, emergencies don't wait for you to be ready. Rallic's claws flew across his datapad. The upload completed with 2 seconds remaining. Lyra stood at the front of the classroom, her datapad now connected to the central holographic display. "Let's begin with Cadet Rallic's submission." Rallic's spine went rigid. His fur flattened against his body in an involuntary display of submission. An instinctive response. His species had evolved over millions of years when facing a superior predator. Around him, the other cubs sat impossibly straight, their attention laser-focused. It was strange, Rallic thought distantly, how they all did this. The humans weren't physically imposing by galactic standards. Lyra stood barely taller than most of them, lacked the natural armor of the Chromath, the venom of the Sisisrathi, or the raw strength of the Urgoth. Yet when she walked into a room, every species reacted the same way. They sat straighter than cadets. The holographic display materialized Rallic's work in 3-dimensional space equations, floating like constellations, connected by glowing lines of logic. Lyra studied it in silence for exactly 12 seconds. Rallic counted each one, his respiratory system working overtime. "The foundational approach is sound," Lyra began, and Rallic felt a rush of relief. "Your understanding of quantum field mechanics is excellent. The mathematical framework follows proper, theoretical protocols." She paused, and in that pause, every cub in the room held their breath. "However," the word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Line 47. "You've assumed a stable helium-3 containment field at 0.7 atmospheres. Walk me through that assumption." Rallic's mind raced. 0.7 atmospheres. He'd chosen that value based on standard Vrakesh safety protocols, the same protocols used in every civilian vessel in the collective for the past 200 years. I used the standard safety threshold, Instructor Lyra. I didn't ask what you used. I asked you to walk me through your assumption." Her tone hadn't changed, still neutral, still measured. Somehow, that made it worse. Rallic stood, as protocol demanded when addressing an instructor directly. The Vrakesh Collective's engineering standards mandate 0.7 atmospheres as the minimum safe pressure for helium-3 containment in civilian applications. "Civilian applications," Lyra repeated. "And is the Stellaris Academy training you for civilian applications?" The question struck like a plasma bolt. Around him, Rallic could hear the slight shuffle of other cubs checking their own work. Suddenly, uncertain. "No, instructor. We're training for deep space exploration and potential crisis scenarios." "Correct." Lyra manipulated the holographic display, and suddenly a new equation branch appeared in red, overlaying Rallic's work. "In a re-entry emergency, Atmospheric pressure is variable and unpredictable. Your solution works beautifully in a controlled environment. But space doesn't offer controlled environments. What happens when external pressure drops to point 4? Point 2? Rallic stared at the cascading failure his equations would produce. His elegant solution collapsed like a house of cards in the simulation Lyra had constructed. It fails, he admitted, his voice smaller than he'd intended. It fails, Lyra confirmed. Not because your mathematics is wrong. Not because you're not intelligent, but because you relied on what's always worked before, instead of questioning whether it would work in conditions you haven't experienced yet. She moved to stand directly in front of Rallic's desk. Every other cub watched the interaction, with the intensity of prey animals, observing a predator's hunting lesson. Do you know why humans are good at this? Lyra asked. Why the Galactic Council specifically requests human instructors for advanced crisis training? Rallic shook his head. Because we're persistence hunters from a death world. For 200,000 years, we survived by assuming everything could kill us and planning for the worst possible outcome. We didn't develop space travel because we're the smartest or the strongest. We developed it because we're paranoid enough to imagine every way something can fail and stubborn enough to solve for all of them. She tapped his datapad, and a corrected version of his homework appeared still his work, but with 3 additional redundancy layers he hadn't considered. Redo the assignment. Account for pressure variations from 0.9 to 0.1 atmospheres. Due tomorrow, 0800 hours. Yes, Instructor Lyra. As she moved to the next student's work, Rallic sat down carefully. His posture remained perfectly straight, his attention absolute. Around him, every cub did the same. They weren't sitting at attention because humans were physically dangerous. They sat straighter than cadets, because Lyra had done something far more terrifying than threaten them. She'd shown them how easily they could fail, then given them the tools to succeed anyway. That, Rallic was beginning to understand, was the most human thing of all.